So today I'm going to be teaching you how to read and overlay a mosaic crochet chart just like this one. Now I'm starting with a fairly small, fairly simple one just so that you can get to grips with the basics and then you'll be ready to tackle anything. So let's go through this chart step by step. As you can see along the bottom here you've got the numbers 1 to 19 and that shows how many stitches are in each row. Equally, this chart is square, so you have 1 to 19 going up the side, which shows you that this chart has 19 rows. So you're going to have 19 rows by 19 stitches. Now this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but trust me, once you get used to it, it is really easy. So if we start with this first column here, now as you can see there are two different coloured squares. The darker square is labelled A and the lighter square is labelled B. Now, two things to remember about this column. Number one, the letter that you can see tells you what colour you are crocheting for that row. And yes, I mean for that row. So even, for example, when you look at this B row here, you've got both dark and light squares. It doesn't matter, it is all going to be crocheted using colour B. The same for the next row. So the next row is colour A, but you have both dark and light squares. Doesn't matter, it is all going to be crocheted using colour A. So get that really clear, you're going to be using one colour per row. And for the most basic version of overlay mosaic crochet, that means you're going to be attaching your yarn at this end and cutting it at this end before starting with your new colour. So you're always working in one direction from right to left across the chart. The second thing to know about this particular column is that it is the first stitch of every row. The first stitch is always a single crochet. Similarly, the last stitch of the row, which is marked with a plus sign, is also a single crochet for every single one of these stitches. So it makes it really nice and easy. It's symmetrical. You start with a single crochet, you end with a single crochet. Now you say, what about all of these squares in the middle? Now, it can be very difficult to ignore to start with, but please pay no attention to the colour changes in the middle of the chart. Yes, it shows you what your final design is going to look like, but it has absolutely no bearing on what stitch you're going to be putting as you go across. So each square represents one stitch, but the colour of that stitch does not make any difference. What is far more important is whether your square is blank or has a cross in it. So if your square is blank, like this one here, that indicates doing a back loop only single crochet. Nice and straightforward. However, if it's a square with an X in it, that is a front loop only double crochet. The really important thing to know though is that the loop that you're going to be working into is actually going to be the same colour 2 rows down. I will show you what I mean as we go along. Each chart will also have some sort of key. Now this isn't a complete key, but it tells you all of the different types of squares that you're going to find in your chart. And for this very basic key, it just tells you what colour you're going to be using. As you can see, my squares are not purple and white because I've printed this in black and white. In a more thorough chart, it will actually tell you an X is front loop only double crochet, a plus is a single crochet, a blank square is a back loop only single crochet. I've just done a very simple version here because I'm going to be explaining it all to you. If you would like a copy of this chart so that you can print it out and work along with me, I know a lot of people still prefer to work with written patterns, then there's a link below on how to get your own copy. So I'm just going to move this chart up slightly, and as there were two colours on the chart, I have picked two colours of yarn for us to be working with today. I've made them nice and contrasting so that you can see exactly what I'm going to be doing. So I've decided that this colour is going to be colour A. So I'm just going to unwind a bit for us to work with. Now, just like with most projects, I say most projects because you do have magic rings, we're going to start this one with a slip knot. You've then got your appropriate size hook for the size of yarn you're using, and you're going to pull it tight. Now, you have two choices for this very first row here. There are 19 stitches in the row. You could, option 1, do 20 chains and then starting from the second chain in your hook, single crochet your way back so that you'd end up with 19 single crochets and a turning chain. However, I prefer to do foundation single crochets, so you simply need to start with 19 of them to do your first row. So that is exactly what I am going to do now. And I will speed this part up just to make it a little bit more bearable for you to watch. So once you have your 19 foundation single crochets or single crochets, depending on which method you used, you're simply going to fasten off and cut your yarn. And there you have it, row 1 from your chart. Now for row 2, as you can see here, it says colour B. So we're going to get our second colour yarn. Bear with me while I just find the end. There it is. And again, you can join using whatever method you prefer. Some people like to do standing single crochets. For security, I tend to go with attaching mine with a slip stitch. And then chaining 1 to reach working height. Now, as you can see, if you look across this second row for B, all of the squares, apart from obviously the first one and the last one that have the B and the plus, are completely blank, which means they're all going to be back loop only single crochet. So for the B square, we do a regular single crochet. For the blank squares, we're going to do a back loop only single crochet. So you've still got this front loop here that hasn't been worked into. We're going to crochet our way across. So we've got to stitch number 18. Remember, stitch number 19 is a plus. So we're going to do a regular old single crochet going underneath both parts of the V before we fasten off and cut our end. So you now have a colour A row and a colour B row. As you can see here, it goes back to colour A. So I do exactly the same for every row. Make my slip knot, attach back to my work with a slip stitch, and chain 1 to reach working height. Now the first stitch in row 3 is the letter A, which is a single crochet. Next we have our first X. Now remember what I said, this is a front loop only double crochet. So you're going to yarn over to do your double crochet part, and you're going into the front loop, only it's not the front loop of this pale B stitch here, it's the A stitch below. And as you will see, this means that it is going to cover up the B stitch so that it will not be visible, or at least a heck of a lot less visible when you finish your pattern, which will give us this design that you can see here. So the next 3 stitches are back loop only single crochets. Now, if you're okay going, yeah, that's my stitch there, I can just put my hook straight in. If, for example, you've had to skip quite a few stitches because you've done a lot of front loop only double crochets, sometimes it pays just to tip your work forwards and count the number of stitches along the back to make sure that you haven't missed too many or too few before doing your back loop only single crochet. The last thing you want to do is to reach the end of the row and realise that you've got your stitch count wrong and you've messed up somewhere, unravel it all and have to figure it out. So again, we've got an X here followed by 3 back loop only single crochets, and it does follow this pattern across until we get to the last stitch. So that means the front loop only double crochet into the stitch 2 rows down, and then 3 back loop only single crochets. And I shall speed it up to get to the end of the row for you. Just as with the previous rows, the last stitch is a plus, which means that it is a single crochet. Fasten off and cut your yarn. So as you can see already, The very first and last stitches of the row, the colour keeps changing, and that is visible, that is normal. Where you get your front loop only double crochets, it's covering up the colour underneath, which helps you to start forming the pattern. So this is going to be the bottom of these little squares, and these bits here are going to be the lines that go in between them. So let's go back to colour B. So again, I've attached my yarn, and the first stitch is a single crochet. Now we go back to our chart, we look at row 4, which is the one that we're on, and it goes no XX, no XX, no XX, the whole way across until we get to our plus. Nice and straightforward. So if you remember, the no X is a back loop only single crochet, so that's going on top of the previous front loop only double crochet. And the next one is a front loop only double crochet, but remember, we're not doing it into the front loop of the green stitch, we're going down to the cream stitch, so the same color stitch. We're then going to do our back loop only single crochet again, oops, and keep alternating our way along. So we're doing our single crochet into the very last stitch to represent our plus, and cutting the end. Now, as you can see, these work up really quick. I'm going to fast forward a bit so that you can see what more of the design looks like. As you can see, I am now 11 out of 19 rows in, and the rest of the design is starting to appear in this section here. Now you just keep going until you reach the end of your 19 rows. You then have a decision to make. You can either leave your ends as a little kind of fringe if you chop them all to roughly the same length, or you can watch this video here and learn how to hide them all, not weave them in, remember that, no weaving in of ends, via an envelope border. When you are ready, you can try other designs such as these to get your love of mosaic crochet fully embedded. See you in the next video.